college football, talking Tide, and very apropos that we're talking Tide. We've got Tide 102.9's Ryan Fowler on the line for the first time joining the show. We appreciate it, Ryan.
Hey, Mark, it's good to be able to talk with you, man. I mean, we're just enjoying a beautiful weather here in T-Town. It was almost 80 degrees, almost. It's kind of like Alabama with Josh Jacobs and Damian Harris. We almost scored a touchdown against Clemson, but it was just a little bit short. We came up a couple of degrees short, just like we came up a couple of yards short there in Clemson.
Ryan, do you know where I am?
No, I don't.
Do you have any idea? Because I work at a particular place here, I'm in Connecticut. I've been brought to Connecticut, so it's not 80 degrees here, nor 60, nor 40.
That just stinks. Okay, well, I didn't mean to rub that in. I didn't know where you were located, but yeah, it's man, it is beautiful weather here. But we're going down to the 30s next week, so we've got this S word that's creeping in around here. Ooh. Not Saban, snow.
Wow, that doesn't happen too often.
No, not at all. Not at all.
All right, Ryan, we don't have you for too much time here. Would love to have you back, I'm sure.
Yeah, sure,
but we'll dive into it here for 6-7 minutes. Okay. So this is what I got for you. I would love to know the vibe of the Alabama fan base, considering the Alabama fans that I talked to prior to the national championship game were very, I'm talking about the logical ones, the reasonable ones, were very respectful of Clemson, thought it would be a good game. But I could tell none of them were concerned, worried. They just chalked it up as a win. And I'm not disrespecting them in saying that. I could just tell the way they talked about the game. They respected Clemson's talent, but figured we're a powerhouse. This is going to be a win. It's going to be a nice 7 to 10 point win, and we'll chalk up another national championship. Was there shock after the game, especially 44-16? And is it like, okay, that was awful, but that's an aberration. We're still king of the hill. We're fine. Or, wow, are there trouble spots here?
Well, I think there was trouble spots, and I think those were probably covered up by Nick Saban. But I think when you look back, it's one of those that you don't ever see Nick Saban getting beat like that. And I think a lot of Alabama fans, that's one of the worst beatdowns that, forget about Nick Saban. You have to go back to like the 90s to find, even through some dark days here in Tuscaloosa, you don't find a beatdown like that. So, no, I think Alabama fans are a very smart football fan base. And so when you talk about giving credit, yeah, they give credit to Clemson, but they also realize that, maybe as a coaching staff, maybe as a group of players, that somewhere there was a disconnect. Either they did not have a good game plan, or maybe the players maybe thought they were just going to walk in and beat Clemson by an easy margin. But Alabama fans are, you got to remember, I do a football show 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, 20 hours a week. I talk to the best fans in the country. We spend time, breaking down this game. We played the what-if game for probably maybe 2.5, 3 weeks following that. And I think we all sort of came to the conclusion that, listen, Dabo and his coaching staff, they outcoached Nick Saban. That's hard to say. But you've also got to be honest with yourself. Dabo and his coaching staff outcoached the staff in Tuscaloosa. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of new coaches depart for other jobs, but even some that probably Nick Saban was pushing out the door as well.
Got Ryan Fowler on the line. His show is The Game on Tide 102.9 FM. Ryan, I rewatched the first quarter because I just wanted to see this again to make sure I was seeing what I was seeing, considering 30 straight points from Clemson to close it out 44-16. Aside from the pick six early, Alabama played a flawless offensive first quarter. They rang up like 240 yards of total off. They were like on a 1,000-yard total offense pace. Tua was dropping back, had a clean pocket, nobody close to him, delivering the ball. Wide receivers were gaining separation. It was easy pitch and catch. The running game was pounding Clemson. Then it was that third drive where they should have scored the touchdown that you alluded to, where they got to the 1-yard line, didn't punch it in, went up 16-14 on the field goal. Then after that, it was just like nothing.
It was, and I think that's the drive, inside the red zone that Alabama just really struggled. And when you look back, it's Josh Jacobs to me. Now, this is Ryan's opinion, and this is worth, that about $1.50 will get you a cup of coffee down at the local fast food place. But when
That's
you look
about our
back,
speed here, Ryan. So you're right in the ballpark.
I'm gonna give you my opinion. I think Josh Jacobs, in my opinion, was the better back. That just when I look at Josh Jacobs, I just thought he had a hot hand. And I thought whenever they brought in, listen, I like Damian Harris, man. He accomplished some great things at Tuscaloosa. But I just thought Josh was, for some reason, and we don't know sometimes the inner workings of, what plays. But I thought whenever they brought him out of the game, if you'll go back and watch the play, I thought if they would have kept him in, what happens if they score that touchdown on that drive that we're talking about? It to me, football is a game of momentum. If you got it, keep it. Don't let it go. And I thought the inside the 1 yard line, inside the 2, to me, they just let things slip away. And I thought the game plan really changed. Josh Jacobs, I just thought if they would have gave it him one more time inside the 1 yard line, I can't remember, maybe inside the 1, maybe inside the 2. If they'd have gave it to him one more time, I think they would have scored a touchdown. And you wonder how the game would have worked out different if that happens. It was and I bet you, we can get into this conversation. I think it's human nature. Mike Locksley, I think, is going to do well at Maryland. But if you and I were working at an employer and we turned in a 2-week notice, you've also got to ask yourself, are you going to give everything you've got to that employer for 2 weeks? Now, I'd love to be able to say, oh, yeah, listen, easy. Yeah, I'd come out there for 2 weeks. I'd give everything I had to that employer for 2 weeks. But I don't know if that's really true. I think it's for human nature for us to kind of back off a little bit. We begin to get distracted. We begin to kind of focus on our new job, what tasks we're going to be handed to, and what we're going to be asked to do. I mean, you begin to get excited, and I think that's human nature. I don't know if Mike Locksley could look and say, I did my very best in game planning for Clemson. I don't know if he could tell you that, and I highly doubt that was his best game plan. I don't think it was.
And Ryan, to further your point, it's not like the next job is down at Walmart that basically once you start on Monday morning at 9 o'clock, then your responsibilities start. You don't have to give it any thought before that. You get your assignment once you start. We're talking about you're going to be evaluated making multi-millions of dollars based on your win-loss record. So you got to prepare a program, and there's something called recruiting, and every second counts. So for those 2 weeks, especially that time of year, recruiting is at a fever pitch. And so you need to be preparing yourself for success at the next job.
No, 100%. Whether you're talking about recruiting, but, and we're both in the media business, man. Every minute counts. If there's no way that we can make 25 hours, even though we need more hours in the day. It's just not possible for us just to say, hey, we've got. And so I think probably time caught up with him. I think also when you look at Oklahoma, now defensively, they were not very, very good. But offensively, I think it required a lot of time. And I think that was also a benefit. I'm not trying to take anything. And so for Clemson fans out there that are watching this, I'm not trying to take any shade at you guys whatsoever. I respect what y'all been able to accomplish. But I think when you play Notre Dame, I think it gave you some wiggle room. And I think you've even heard that coming out of South Carolina, that it allowed them to kind of spend more time prepping for possibility of Alabama. And I think with Oklahoma and Kyler Murray, from a coaching perspective, I don't know if they could say, hey, listen, we're only going to spend limited time, because if you do that, you may not make it through Oklahoma. So I think from a coaching perspective, I think Oklahoma demanded more time than Notre Dame did on the Clemson side. And listen, coaching is when you've got teams that are very equal in talent, those little minutes and judgment calls, I mean, who knows? In the final couple of hours, Dabo may have spotted something in Alabama. That 2 extra hour film study, he may have said, you know what? Whoa, I got something right here. He may have found something that he liked and said, you know what, we're going to expose these guys. Certainly they did in Santa Clara.
And I don't know if this is valid or not. I'm just throwing it out there that if you go back 4 to 6 weeks before that, even though Alabama won the games easily over LSU, Mississippi State, and Auburn, they were still upper echelon tier opponents that give you a physical beating. over Clemson playing the likes of Pitt and Mississippi. I'm trying to think who else they were playing down the stretch. Wake Forest, Pitt, the likes of those teams, and of course Georgia in an SEC championship game versus Pitt, a 42-10 game in the SEC championship game. There was just a lot more wear and tear on this Alabama football team than the Clemson team because of the schedule down the stretch.
Well, and I think and I was going to go quickly to see if I could help you pull up the schedule, but I mean, I remember looking at it going, man, I mean, that 2018 schedule. But, Alabama's got that 2019 schedule that is not very challenging. But I guess you could look at it. You can look at it a couple of different ways. And this is where I'm going to blame the rest of the SEC on Alabama's defeat out in everybody's going to take responsibility for this. Man, when Nick Saban gets a butt whipping like he did in Santa Clara, everybody's going to take a little bit of blame. So I'm going to blame a little bit of the SEC on this. Because think about it in this year. With all the coaching issues, and I'll go to an article real quick, and I know you and I will get to talk, and we'll probably be here 20 more minutes. That's okay, because, I mean, I love football, and you do too. So Chris Lowe, ESPN, broke an article a couple of, maybe about a month ago, that Tosh LaPoy, the defensive coordinator, lost his play calling responsibility in the first month of the season, okay? So when we look at that, Pete Golding called the plays. According to Chris Lowe from ESPN, we had him on. We had him on our show here in Tuscaloosa. But nobody was able to take advantage of that. And Alabama was not challenged until when? Clemson. So you can look at it a couple of different ways. Maybe they didn't know. I mean, if somebody would have beat them up a little bit and said, you know what, here's your problems. Let me expose you. Let me have a chance to look at it and say, hey, this is where you guys have got problems, and then you have a chance to correct those problems. So you can look at it a couple of different ways. If you're very confident in everything you're doing, then I guess an easy schedule is good. And that's the problem that I've tried to get Alabama fans to convince this year. When you look at this 2019 schedule for Alabama, I don't want to say it's a walk in the park, but it's favorable. I mean, you can look like it from here as we're 185 days away from Duke. I mean, right there, that doesn't get your attention. The non-conference opponents, no. I mean, there's nothing there that you're going, man, you're going to have to prepare for this team. So when you go through that 2019 schedule, it's going to be helpful for Alabama. And maybe you'll have it from an injury standpoint. But then when you back up a little bit, the one area is, are you really going to know anything about your football team? Because you may get to Georgia in the SEC championship game, and you're like, okay, I didn't know I had these problems. Because, see, I think that was the look that you remember the look that we saw on Nick Saban in Santa Clara at halftime? Man, I've never seen that look from Nick Saban. I think he knew it was too late. He knew at that point, he said, it caught up with us. It caught up with us. And I don't think he could do anything about it. I just think when you begin to look at the 2018, he realized there in Santa Clara, he got exposed. I think if you look, ask Nick Saban, he'd probably love to have been exposed against Mississippi State. He'd love to have been exposed against LSU and said, hey, this is a weakness. But nobody in the SEC could push Alabama to a limit where the weaknesses that they had, they showed up.
Texas A&M was probably the closest. I think they were within like a score, like 8 points sometime in early third quarter.
Yeah, but nobody really pushed Alabama around. You could say Georgia in the SEC championship.
Sure. Yes. They did.
And if you go back, then they corrected the problems going into Oklahoma, because you remember, I mean, their offense was clicking. They looked like they spent a lot of time. So, and then obviously Clemson must have found something that they wanted to expose.